People think that our next speaker is smart because she wears glasses. I know that she is smart because I've had an opportunity to see the work that she does. The REST API endpoints were added to core in October, and they were added by Rachel. She was responsible for ensuring that all 99 people who were credited with contributing had their names spelled correctly. So please join me in welcoming the lead developer of the REST API, Rachel Baker.
It was very nice of Jordan to leave out that it actually took 3 commits to get the REST API endpoint commit correct, or test passing, at least. Well, thanks everyone for coming. So let's talk about WordPress and how we can possibly make it into real-time REST API. So as has been discussed and talked about all throughout the day, WordPress 4.7 has REST API and content endpoints built in. The REST API infrastructure went in 4.4, but finally in about December, we have content endpoints. So this is revolutionary, right? So it's not like Sam Adams, John Hancock kind of revolutionary, but like we are fighting against the tyranny of XML. And so if you visit we have a demo WordPress site. If you were to visit that or any WordPress site that runs WordPress 4.7 and above, you can hit like the path wp/wp/v2/posts, and you'll see, bam, like the 10 latest posts from that site if they have 10. Get a nice little array of objects, and kind of expanded it here. So that's pretty cool, right? Like, yeah, that looks different than what you see in the admin. Looks much better than if you've ever seen like XML written up. It's machine readable, it's human readable. Like, you know, you can look at that and understand what's going on. But like REST APIs require you to have pull operations, meaning that like REST API is like that friend you have that like you always have to call to like have them do something with you. They like never call you, you know, you're always like, hey, what's going on? You want to do something this weekend? They're like, yeah, sure. But like, why didn't you call me if you're not doing it? That's kind of what they are. So you have to request information if you want it, which means that you never know if anything's ever changed. So you kind of end up having to like stalk your endpoints. Like, what's up? Anything changed? Anything going on now? Still the same response? And what that means is like you're polling your endpoints. And that is a performance drain. It also is just creepy to stalk endpoints or people. Don't do that. So there are a lot of use cases that doesn't work with, right? So sometimes you want to get notified when an event happens. You want information to be pushed out to you. Some examples would be you've separated like the back end of your CMS from like the front end application that's like rendering views to your visitors. And let's say there's breaking news, our president has tweeted something crazy again, or there's a new comment to display on the page, or something that like, you know, from the time that someone visits that page, if they're just sitting there, to like, just because something's happened on the back end, you want to like refresh their view without them having to like refresh the page themselves. That would be a great use case for something that like pushes notification to your client that then it's like, oh, if we should go and refresh the new views we have rendered here, and then do that operation. Another one would be, you know, maybe you have a client, like an API. When I say client here, I'm referring to like an API client. So you have some sort of client application or a microservice, or even, I don't know, like an application like a dashboard analytics, or like internal dashboard kind of metrics application, or even like Slack or Zapier or whatever, where you want to send a notification to that when something happens. So you want to, in your dashboard metrics application for your business, you want to show like a new order was received, someone placed an order with WP Commerce, or a post is waiting to be edited, to be published, or a comment is waiting moderation, just some sort of thing like that, where there's like some sort of action that kind of should happen internally. Also, like you want to send a notification to like your Slack bot to then send a notification in Slack, or some sort of action in Zapier where something happens, you want to create a Trello card, whatever. Those kind of things. Those are like when an event happens, you need to send response data somewhere. Another one is, for some reason, somebody talked you into thinking it would be a good idea to try and keep content in sync, like users or anything, really, between multiple WordPress sites or multiple sites or applications. Like, the client says, we already have a bunch of users in our CRM, so it'd be great if we could just use our CRM users with our WordPress site. You can't do that with just REST API. You actually need to, when someone like registers for a site, you have to like send a notification to the other site to say, hey, this happened. Do you have this user? And try to keep those in sync. Not recommended, by the way, bad, but if you're crazy enough to try it, this is the way you'd have to do it. Or, you just have like some sort of like cache or middleware where you need to like break the cache or reset your last modified date headers for your endpoints to just say like, something's changed, like refresh the information. So with the magic of WordPress and the magic of webhooks, who've been around since like 2007, we can do this already, and it's as easy as pie. So what is a webhook? A webhook is essentially just you give a URL that you are waiting at the other end of and waiting for the application to notify you that something's happened. So a lot of applications we use every day do these. Slack supports webhooks. GitHub, Twilio, Zapier uses them for everything, where kind of whatever application you're using to send the webhook, like it'll tell you how it sends the response. So if you're the thing sending the webhook, like you dictate how the response looks, if that makes sense. And people subscribe to it, and then they take that response and ingest it and do whatever they want with it. So that's kind of essentially what a webhook is. Like you give something a URL, and it tells you like at what event it sends a payload to that URL you just gave it. So WordPress has actions that help this process. Probably the one you're most familiar with, because it's the most abused in all of WordPress, is save post. Anywhere in WordPress that you see like the do action line of code, that's a WordPress action, and those all run all throughout, like pretty much every CRUD action, like everywhere in the code base, and over many places in the code base that anything interesting happens. So users created, a post is published, a comment awaiting moderation, a plugin has been updated, all those kind of things. There's hooks in there, so you can, at any of those actions, have something else, like have it trigger something else to occur. So if we tie this all together, along with a little magic from the REST API, we can do something like this. So this is a function that is called notify user registered, and I'm using the user register action here, where a user is being inserted into the site, not necessarily that they have to register. If you think of like the way WordPress thinks of users registering, not like that, just kind of like a new user is created. So user's created, and what I'm doing here is I'm actually like mocking an internal REST API request, meaning I'm initializing the REST request object and having it mock a request to the user's endpoint, and I'm giving it the user's ID that I get with the hook. And I have it essentially, without making an external call, it will return to me what the REST API would return here if you were to hit that endpoint. So I'm just then going to check and make sure that was my request successful? If I get a 200 in the status, then yes. If so, I'm going to get the data from the request the response that it returned to me, and here I've just hard coded a callback URI here. I'm going to send this request to this example.com URL, and then I'm going to use WP safe remote post, and I'm going to pass the response data along to the callback URI that I have here, and send it. I used to do some error handling and checking, but that's it. Now I can, to whatever client, as long as on the other end of that that URL, I have to accept this information and then do whatever it is that I would want to do with it. But that's how we can have a real-time REST API right away. But this gets sort of unwieldy after a while because hard to keep track of the callback URLs, like what hook do I have running where, and who the heck wrote this thing, and all sorts of why are we even doing this anymore? All sorts of stuff, So it's and by the way, it's just not very restful. So that's where REST hooks come in, and what REST hooks are is essentially it's a way to make it so people, I shouldn't say people, so applications or users can subscribe to webhooks and subscribe to some sort of hook. They give their callback URI. It allows them to manage all their notification subscriptions using subscription endpoints. So you're using REST API endpoints to make it so folks can say I want to subscribe to this hook and that hook with these callback URIs, and then that happens. If they want to change it later on, they can send a put request and update that. So to do this, we need 4 things. One is we're going to need a database table or some sort of thing to store these subscriptions in. We're going to need a way to list, create, modify, delete subscriptions via API endpoints, as well as list the available event hooks in an endpoint, and then a mechanism to send hooks that we just talked about, that user register one. But instead of just firing to a regular callback URI, it needs to loop over the subscriptions to figure out who should get this notification. So kind of just a model here for how you do it is so for each hook you kind of want to show the hook name, which it's recommended to do noun.verb, so user.created, user.updated, user.deleted, post.created, post.updated, post.deleted, etc. So give each one a name, just to name the hook of the object and then what the event was, just descriptions, people know what it is. And then the template is the payload template, that this is the data that you're sending along to that callback, the callback URL they give you. So if you were to list it, it looks something like this, where just create yourself a list endpoint at I'm using API v1 as the namespace here, but then hooks is my endpoint. If I send a GET request there, I get an array of objects back, and this is kind of what it looks like. To do this template here, I'm actually just using the schema from the user controller. So I also need subscription. So do a subscription, you kind of just some sort of unique ID. That's why I recommend a table, so have it just be an auto incrementing ID, and then what hook that this ID is has subscribed to, the application name. So is this who subscribed to this? Was it Mika? Was it Joe? Was it Ryan? Was it Rachel? Who subscribed to this? Some sort of way that you tie with authentication back to this. The URI, the callback, the place you're gonna send that data template, a payload when that event happens, and just a way to say them have like turn it off or turn it on. So that way you give them a way to make it so they don't have to delete it. Like they can just like make it inactive and turn it back on. That's nice to have, not required. Just gonna create a few endpoints here to a way to list them, a way to create a new subscription where like you're just gonna pass in the hook name you want, as well as flipping back to this, you just pass in like the hook name and the URL, and then I assume probably active probably defaults to true, but then it'll assign you the ID and then like return you back that in the response. Just a way to get just a single subscription and edit it or delete it. So when you list them, they look like this. And which means if I kind of tie this together, so as I said, we need a way to kind of take these subscriptions and then like notify them when the event happens. Going back to my favorite user register hook here, kind of not much has changed here. I added a little like status conditional where I'm just checking to make sure that the request internally was successful. If so, I'm going to grab all the subscriptions. So just some sort of mock function that'll go and get all the available subscriptions from the database, and then just loop over them and say like, okay, so if like the subscription hook isn't empty and user created equals doesn't equal the subscription hook, right? Bail. But if so, then that means that I should to the given like subscription URI, I should send them this response data. So if so, then I'll go ahead and send them a response, and as the safe post, I'll send them the response from the mocked request above, and then to check for errors. And after I'm done, like that's it. So this all can happen like right in the line in your code. There's some gotchas, of course, to this system. I can't cover all of this in a 30-minute talk, but the biggest ones are that either that to your client, if you were to get a 400 or 500 response error, there's probably something you want to do there. Is it that you want to log it? If these are just things you're using internally, you probably just want to like log it, or maybe fire off an email or something to let you know that something's wrong with like your endpoint at the other end. Some sort of thing, so you know that like the client knows that you were expecting to receive a notification, but like I can't send it to you for some reason. The performance of like the inline hook delivery that I showed above, after a while, starts to get pain on the performance level of your site and how much traffic it gets and how often you're firing these hooks. After a while, it can start to get a little crazy where you're going to want to move this to like a delayed queue system. Same basic logic, but instead of sending like WP safe remote post there, you're going to like fire off or request to queue that item from happening and have it like happen in the background. Impact of like payload size. If you're sending enough of these hooks that the response data from the API endpoints is too large, where you should probably start trimming that down a bit. Security and authentication, always a bummer, and always hard to do. And kind of just depends on how you're using this, like how serious you want to get about it. And the last one is like essentially everything I just said is like I just told you how to build your own RPC API from a REST API. So you're now maintaining two APIs. Isn't being a developer fun? That's it. Any questions? Jordan. Hold on, he's coming. Very slowly.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank
Are there
you.
any questions?
I think you mentioned this in your there at the end, but I was wondering when you have the code that says here is the request I would make, and it says REST do request. That's mocking the request, like internally. It's not like talking to itself.
It kind of is. It's kind of talking to itself.
Oh.
It's not making the full external.
Okay.
Like it's not going. out to get it. It actually takes that request object and then
As if
pretends that it
requested.
happened.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you're not like, because I was worried like, oh, but like race conditions, time,
No,
things.
it's not doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. That actually, honestly, like this whole talk was a real con to tell people about that function. Thank you for listening. No.
Generally.
Oh, I'm sorry, not him.
Oh, okay.
Tough.
I feel like maybe this, like, is this a plugin that you've written? Do you want to write a plugin that does this? You just showed us all the code.
I am never writing a plugin with you again.
That's fair.
I love you. No, is this a plugin? No. Could it be? Yes. So there is actually a WordPress plug. I know everyone in this room is shocked. There is actually a WordPress plugin that allows you to like for all the bunch of various hooks that are in WordPress to just give like a callback URL and then it'll fire. It then sends like the post object, like mine's better because it uses the REST API, and allows you to like modify that response. And the plugin's like several years old. I mean solid, but like several years old. So there's hooks that it doesn't have in there. It doesn't even support. You know, I guess. Yeah. Maybe Ryan has like, you know, a spare weekend available to spin this up into a plugin. Hard pass though.
Are there any other questions? Not from members of the REST API team.
Oh, I mean, you know, he can keep asking questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Great. I am only around for a little bit longer because I do have a flight to catch. But if anyone has any questions that they want to catch up, please come find me shortly. I will be in the back somewhere. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.